Have you ever noticed how comforting a medical diagnosis can actually be?
Oh, yeah, for sure. Even if it's not great news.
Right, even if it's bad news,
Right.
there is just something deeply grounding about the precision of it.
Yeah.
You fall, your arm swells up, you go to the hospital, and, the x-ray shows that stark, jagged white line across the bone.
It's undeniable.
Exactly. The doctor points to the screen and says, there it is, a transverse fracture.
Mm.
And the ambiguity just vanishes. The problem is visible, it's categorized, and it exists entirely in the present moment. You put cast on it, it heals, and you move on.
Yeah, the physical world really offers us that luxury, the luxury of presence. We see the break, we apply the fix. It's this closed loop of cause and effect that we can literally observe with our own eyes.
But then you step out of the hospital and into the world of history, or, human society's generational memory, and suddenly that x-ray machine is completely useless.
Totally useless.
Right. You look at a society in turmoil, or a political system that just keeps repeating the exact same catastrophic mistakes, and you can't just point to a clean break on a glowing screen. We are looking at a diagnostic landscape that is incredibly murky.
Oh, absolutely.
And that actually brings us to the core of what we are doing today. We are stepping into the philosophical equivalent of these deep, uncharted waters where the x-ray just can't reach.
We're looking at the things that don't cast a shadow, but they still carry immense weight.
We are taking you into one of the most profound, challenging, and really just mind-bending slices of post-Cold War philosophy. Our stack of sources today for this deep dive is entirely centered on Jacques Derrida's 1993 book. It's called Specters of Marx, The State of the Debt, The Work of Mourning, and the New International.
And the historical context surrounding its publication, which is huge.
So huge. We are going to explore a completely different way to look at reality, at time itself, and at the immense, often invisible responsibility that we have to each other. We're looking at concepts like spectrality, this radical redefinition of justice, and the incredibly unsettling reality that the past never actually stays buried.
It really requires a fundamental shift in how we perceive the structures of our daily lives. I mean, we have to abandon that comfort of the visible, quantifiable break we were just talking about and learn to navigate the unseen forces that actually dictate our reality.
Right. But before we really dive into the mechanics of all this, I want to be super upfront with you about the territory we are crossing today. The source material deals heavily with subjects that generate a whole lot of heat. I mean, Marxism, the fall of Soviet communism, the triumphs and the failures of liberal capitalism.
Very charged topics.
Incredibly charged. So I want to be explicitly clear that our goal here is strictly to analyze the architecture of Derrida's arguments. We're treating this text like a complex piece of machinery. We're, opening the hood to see how the engine of his philosophy works. We are not handing out voter guides or endorsing any specific political ideology, left or right. We are impartially reporting on the text just to understand the profound questions it raises.
And, to understand the engine, you first have to understand the environment it was built to operate in. The timing of this text is not incidental at all. It is the entire catalyst for the philosophy. We really have to transport ourselves back to the early 1990s.
The end of the Cold War.
Exactly. The Berlin Wall has just fallen in 1989. The Soviet Union rapidly collapses shortly after that. And the geopolitical map that had locked the entire world into this tense binary standoff for nearly half a century is suddenly, breathtakingly just erased.
I can only imagine the sheer whiplash of that moment. I mean, for decades, the world lived under this constant humming threat of nuclear annihilation between two superpowers. And then, almost overnight, one side just dissolves.
Poof, gone.
The sources describe this overwhelming wave of optimism washing over Western democratic states at that time. There was a profound sense of vindication, almost like a collective exhale, that the great ideological war was finally over and, quote-unquote, the good guys had won.
Yeah, and that euphoria really crystallized in a highly influential thesis by the political scientist Francis Fukuyama. He called it the end of history and the last man.
Oh, right, the end of history.
Yeah, and Fukuyama wasn't just saying that the Cold War was over. He was making a much grander, Hegelian claim. He argued that the collapse of Soviet communism represented the absolute finish line of human ideological evolution.
Wait, the absolute finish line?
The finish line. In his view, liberal democracy and free market capitalism had definitively won the historical tournament. They basically constituted the final, ultimate form of human government.
So no more grand ideological struggles, no more world-shattering revolutions, just this gradual global rollout of free markets and parliamentary democracies until the end of time.
That was the idea, yeah.
I always think of Fukuyama's thesis like the ending of a massive, epic blockbuster movie. You know, the hero strikes the final blow, the evil empire crumbles, the swelling orchestral music kicks in, and the credits roll. It's incredibly satisfying.
Very tidy.
Too tidy. Because the problem with the blockbuster ending is that it completely ignores the fundamental nature of reality. What happens the morning after the credits roll? The city is still destroyed, people still have to figure out how to eat, and the underlying resentments haven't vanished. History doesn't just clock out and go home because a wall came down.
That is so spot on. The assumption of a clean break is the great illusion of 1989. And Jacques Derrida enters this conversation as the great disruptor of that illusion. He delivers this fierce polemic against the sunny, triumphalist end of history narrative.
He wasn't buying it.
It's not. Derrida looks at the celebrations and essentially says, you cannot simply hold an autopsy, declare a massive historical force like Marxism dead, sign the death certificate, and expect to be done with it. Ideologies and historical traumas do not respect death certificates.
Because when you declare something dead, but its memory continues to cause unrest, when the inequalities it pointed out are still festering, it doesn't just disappear, it transforms.
Right.
It loses its physical body, in this case, the Soviet state apparatus, but the spirit remains. It becomes a ghost. And this brings us to the central, honestly, the most critical concept of Derrida's entire book.
Yes. He introduces the concept of the specter, or the revenant, which is a French term that literally translates to that which comes back.
That which comes back.
Right. And to really grasp how radical this is, we have to look at the entire tradition of Western philosophy, going all the way back to the ancient Greeks. Classic philosophy is completely obsessed with ontology.
Ontology meaning the study of being.
Exactly. It concerns itself with what definitively exists, what is fully present, what is real, observable, and measurable.
It's the philosophy of the X-ray we talked about. Broken or not broken, present or absent.
Precisely. But a specter shatters the rules of ontology entirely. A ghost is a paradox. It is neither fully present nor fully absent. It's not living, yet it clearly is not entirely dead because it acts upon the living. It hovers in this impossible sort of liminal space between being and non-being. It is a presence that is defined by its lack of physical substance.
And Derrida actually coins a really brilliant term for this. He takes the word ontology and twists it into hauntology.
Yeah, in French, the two words sound virtually identical, ontology and hauntology.
Well, clever.
It's a great linguistic play, but it carries massive philosophical weight. Hauntology replaces the study of absolute presence with the study of that which haunts us. It suggests that our reality isn't made up of clean binary categories of what is real and what is not. Instead, reality is defined by the things that return, the historical echoes and traces that are constantly interrupting our present moment.
What I find so fascinating here is that Derrida doesn't reach for another dry philosophical text to anchor this big idea. He goes straight to Shakespeare.
Yes, Hamlet.
He grounds this entire massive critique of post-Cold War politics in the opening scene of Hamlet. We have the ghost of Hamlet's father appearing on the dark ramparts of the castle in Elsinore. Hamlet sees this apparition, realizes the terrifying magnitude of what it means, and utters the line, "The time is out of joint."
That single line, "the time is out of joint," acts as the absolute gravitational center for Derrida's thesis. Hamlet isn't just saying, like, things are a little weird right now. He is recognizing a fundamental dislocation in the very fabric of reality. The appearance of the ghost means that the past has violently intruded into the present.
Let me stop and really push on this for a second because it's super easy to just nod along to Shakespeare. Is Derrida just using a ghost as a highly educated poetic metaphor for a bad memory?
Hi.
Well, because if I remember a bad breakup, my present is technically interrupted by the past, right? But that's just psychology. Is Derrida actually saying something structural about how time itself functions?
Oh, he is absolutely making a profound structural claim about time, far beyond just human psychology or memory. Derrida argues that the concept of a purely present, self-identical now, like a moment completely isolated from what came before and what will come after, is a complete fiction.
A fiction.
Yes. Every single fraction of a second is already inherently haunted. It contains the heavy, inescapable traces of the past, and it is pulled forward by the anticipation of the future.
So if I clap my hands right now, That sound isn't just existing in a vacuum. It only makes sense. It only has reality because of the silence that preceded it and the echo that follows it. The now is just a collision of the past and the future.
That is exactly the dynamic. Because the now cannot exist independently, time is never perfectly aligned or synchronized with itself. It is perpetually unhinged. It is always, by its very nature, out of joint.
Wow.
So when Fukuyama declares the end of history, he is relying on a linear ontological view of time. A straight line that has finally reached its destination, where the present has conquered everything. Derrida counters that you can never conquer history because the foundation of time itself is haunted.
It makes me think of building a pristine, ultra-modern glass skyscraper directly on top of an ancient, unmarked burial ground. You can pour all the concrete you want, you can install the fastest elevators, but the structural integrity of the building is forever compromised by what is buried beneath it. You can't just declare the past over when the past is the dirt you're actually standing on.
And that buried past doesn't just lie there passively either. It demands a reckoning. This is where Derrida's reading of Hamlet introduces a truly unnerving dynamic regarding our relationship with history.
Right, because the ghost isn't just floating around.
Exactly. The ghost of the king doesn't just drift through the castle walls looking atmospheric. It fixes its gaze on the living. It speaks. It makes explicit demands on Hamlet to remember, to swear an oath, and to exact justice.
This shifts the entire paradigm. The past isn't a museum exhibit we get to casually observe from behind a velvet rope. The past is looking back at us.
And Derrida hones in on a very specific, chilling detail about the ghost in Hamlet to explain this. The text specifically notes that the apparition of the dead king appears wearing armor, and crucially, armor with the visor down. Derrida calls this the visor effect.
The visor effect. Let's dig into the mechanics of that because it feels like the key to understanding how we experience history.
Well, when a knight wears a helmet with a lowered visor, it creates a severe asymmetry of the gaze.
Meaning one can see and the other can't.
Right. The ghost can see Hamlet perfectly, but Hamlet cannot see the ghost's eyes. The ghost is completely shielded, anonymous, yet commanding absolute authority. We are subjected to the gaze of the specter before we even recognize it, and we don't know exactly who or what is looking at us from the dark voids of that armor.
I want to ground this in a feeling we've all probably had. Imagine sitting alone in a brilliantly lit interrogation room, facing a massive two-way mirror.
Oh, that's a creepy thought, but yeah.
You know, logically, that someone is standing in the dark on the other side watching you. You can't see their face, you don't know their intentions, but you feel the absolute crushing weight of their gaze. You are instantly put into a position of vulnerability. You are being held to account by an unseen observer, and it dictates your behavior before a single word is spoken.
That feeling of being scrutinized and held to account by the unseen, is exactly how Derrida describes our relationship to the past. The visor effect represents the concept of inheritance.
Inheritance.
Yes. We are addressed by the dead. We are held to account by the historical forces that shaped our world before we even have the intellectual capacity to understand what those forces are. The past looks at us through the visor of history.
And the most terrifying part of this is that inheriting is not an opt-in process. We don't get a terms and conditions form to check when we are born. We are all heirs. We are thrown into a world already deeply scarred by centuries of decisions, wars, and economic systems that we had absolutely no part in creating.
The sources make it clear that inheriting is an absolute condition of our existence. Whether you identify as a Marxist, a capitalist, or completely apolitical, you have inherited the legacy of Marx. You have inherited the legacy of the Cold War. You live within the economic and social architecture constructed by those historical specters.
Usually, when we use the word inheritance, we think of an influx of wealth, a check clearing in the bank, or receiving a pristine family heirloom. It has a positive, passive connotation.
Sure.
But Derrida's inheritance sounds more like inheriting a massive, sprawling, chaotic estate from a deeply complicated and indebted relative. You unlock the front door, and you find rooms filled with priceless art and profound insights. But the foundation is cracking, there are massive liens on the property, and the basement is full of toxic waste.
That's a great analogy.
You can't just take the priceless art and hand the toxic waste back to the bank. You are legally and morally responsible for the entirety of the estate.
That captures the inherent contradiction perfectly. An inheritance is never a singular, unified, pure entity. It is always plural. It is this chaotic mix of triumphs, atrocities, liberating ideas, and oppressive structures. And because it is internally conflicted, we cannot simply accept it passively. To inherit responsibly requires immense, active labor.
How so? I mean, if I'm stuck with the toxic waste, what's the active part?
The active part is the sorting, the filtering, and the critical choosing. You must actively reaffirm certain possibilities within the legacy while fighting against others.
Like with Marx.
Exactly. Take the legacy of Karl Marx. You cannot simply say, I'm going to keep his brilliant critique of how capitalism alienates the worker, but I am going to completely erase the part of his legacy that led to totalitarian state apparatuses and gulags.
Because if you do that, you are just creating a comfortable fiction.
You are. You must confront the entirety of the inheritance. You must actively filter it. You must choose which spirits to invoke and which to lay to rest, but you remain answerable for the whole thing. Inheriting is not receiving, it is a task. It is the critical choice of how you will carry the weight of the past into the future.
Wow. If we accept this premise that we are constantly under the gaze of history through this visor and that we owe this massive unpayable debt to the past, it completely blows up our modern Western understanding of what is fair, what is right, and ultimately what justice actually is.
It forces a total redefinition of justice. This is perhaps Derrida's most vital contribution in the text. He draws a rigid, impenetrable line between two concepts we usually treat as synonyms: the law and justice.
They aren't the same.
Not to Derrida. In French, the word droit encompasses the law, legal rights, and jurisprudence. Derrida argues that the law is fundamentally calculable.
Calculable meaning it works like a spreadsheet.
Exactly like a spreadsheet. The law is an economic equation. It is based on present rights, restitution, punishment, and symmetry. If a corporation illegally dumps chemicals into a river, the law calculates the damage, assigns a multi-million-dollar fine, and once the check clears, the ledger is balanced. The legal system operates entirely in the present tense, managing the affairs of the living.
But justice. True justice, in Derrida's view, has nothing to do with balancing a spreadsheet.
True justice is incalculable. It is infinite. You cannot reduce it to a mathematical equation of reparations, and this is the most radical shift. True justice is not owed to the living. It is owed precisely to those who are not present.
The ghosts.
The ghosts. Justice is a responsibility owed to the dead, those who have suffered the historical violence, the oppressions, the exterminations that built the very world we currently enjoy. And equally, it is owed to the ghosts of the future, the generations not yet born who will inherit the consequences of our current actions.
Okay, this is where I really have to push back. Because practically speaking, this sounds impossible. Our entire moral, ethical, and legal framework is built on the interaction between living, breathing people. How do you realistically render justice to a ghost?
It's difficult to conceptualize for sure.
Right. How do you give justice to a victim who is a century dead? Or to someone who won't be born for another 50 years? Doesn't justice require a living victim and a living perpetrator to have any actual meaning in the real world? Otherwise, it's just like academic guilt.
It is a profound practical objection, and Derrida actually anticipates it. If justice exists outside the realm of the living, how do we ever answer the call? He addresses this tension by introducing one of his most difficult yet beautiful concepts: messianicity without messianism.
That sounds like a riddle. Messianicity without messianism. Let's break the mechanism of that down.
We have to start with traditional messianism, which belongs to the realm of religion and dogma. Messianism is the wait for a specific savior, a known figure like Christ, or the Mahdi, or even a secular messiah like the ultimate proletarian revolution. It involves adhering to strict religious laws, looking toward a specific date on the calendar, and waiting for a known, defined utopia to finally arrive and fix the world.
So traditional messianism is like waiting at the train station for your best friend. You know exactly what they look like, you know what time the train arrives, and you know exactly what you're going to do when they get here.
Yes. Messianicity, however, strips away all of that dogma. It removes the name, the face, and the calendar date. It is the pure underlying structure expectation. It is an absolute, unconditional openness to the future, to what Derrida calls the to come, or avenir in French.
So how does that look in practice? If I'm not waiting for a specific person, what am I doing?
Think of it not as waiting at a train station for a known friend, but as keeping a guest room in your house permanently prepared, the door unlocked, and the porch light on for an absolute stranger you have never met.
Oh, wow.
It is a posture of radical hospitality to the unknown. You are maintaining a structure of expectation for a justice or a true democracy that is always still to come.
It never actually arrives.
It cannot ever fully arrive in the present. The moment a society declares we have achieved ultimate justice or we are the perfect democracy, that society becomes deeply dangerous. Complacency sets in, the system closes itself off, and it immediately becomes blind to the new injustices it is inevitably creating.
That makes total sense.
Justice must remain an open promise, a horizon that constantly pulls us forward. We answer the demands of the ghosts of the past, not by fixing the past, which is impossible, but by striving endlessly for a more hospitable future.
So we are driven by the ghosts to keep the door open. Derrida uses this language of spectrality to completely rewrite how we think about ethics, time, and politics. He's saying the world is inherently haunted. But the most incredible plot twist in this whole book is that Derrida is not the first person to spot ghosts in the machinery of capitalism.
No, he isn't.
He points out that Karl Marx himself, the ultimate materialist, the guy who wanted everything to be about concrete economics and physical labor, was completely obsessed with ghosts, even as he spent his life trying to bust them.
The irony is rich, and Derrida mines it masterfully. To understand this, the sources direct us to look at Marx's early writings, specifically a massive vitriolic text called The German Ideology. In this book, Marx engages in a ferocious, almost obsessive polemic against another philosopher named Max Stirner.
What was Stirner saying that made Marx so angry?
Stirner had written a book called The Ego and Its Own, where he argued that human beings were fundamentally enslaved by ideological abstractions. Stirner claimed that concepts like humanity, the state, the law, and morality were not real things, but hoax or ghosts. Spooks.
Yeah. He believed that the individual ego needed to violently reclaim itself from the possession of these spectral concepts.
And Marx, the guy trying to build a scientific theory of economics, could not stand this kind of talk.
Marx hated it. He mocked Stirner relentlessly, calling him Saint Max. Marx positioned himself as the ultimate philosophical exorcist. He wanted to banish every last spook, spirit, and abstraction from philosophy. For Marx, the only reality was pure materialism. Sensuous physical bodies, actual sweat and labor, the dirt of the earth, and concrete economic conditions. He wanted a philosophy completely scrubbed clean of ghosts.
Reading Derrida's account of this, I couldn't help but picture Marx like a skeptical character in a haunted house movie. Like, he's standing in the middle of a Victorian parlor, crossing his arms, aggressively declaring to the rest of the group, there's a logical, material explanation for everything. It's just the wind. Ghosts aren't real. While right behind him, the piano is playing itself and the furniture is literally floating up to the ceiling.
The analogy holds perfectly because Marx's attempt to build a perfectly sterile, ghost-free materialism fails spectacularly, and it fails within his own defining masterpiece, Capital. Despite his best efforts to be the exorcist, Capital is crawling with phantoms.
This brings us to one of the most famous passages in economic philosophy which Derrida dissects, the concept of commodity fetishism. And to explain it, Marx has to bring in a dancing table. Let's break down how this wooden table becomes haunted.
Marx sets out to explain a seemingly simple question. How does an ordinary physical object, say, a piece of wood crafted into a table, transform into a commodity that holds exchange value in a capitalist market? As long as the table is just a physical thing you put your dinner on, it is pure materialism. It has use value.
I have a $5 piece of wood, I nail it together, I eat on it. Simple.
But the moment that table enters the market to be sold, something bizarre happens. The pure materialist, Marx, is suddenly forced to use the language of the supernatural to describe economics. He writes that the commodity transcends sensuousness. It stops being just wood. He says that it evolves grotesque ideas out of its wooden brain, and it stands on its head and begins to dance.
Why does he have to use ghost stories to explain economics? What is the actual mechanism he's struggling with?
Because the concept of exchange value is inherently spectral. Let's use an everyday example. You have a plain wooden table that costs $50. Right next to it, you have a designer wooden table made of the exact same wood, the exact same nails, taking the exact same amount of physical labor to build. But it has a designer logo stamped on it, and it costs $5,000.
The physical reality, the sensuous material, is identical.
Exactly. So where does the remaining $4,950 of value exist? You can't weigh it, you can't touch it, you can't see it under a microscope. It is what Marx, struggling with the limits of materialism, calls a sensuous, supersensible surplus.
A sensuous, supersensible surplus. That is a heavy piece of jargon.
In plain terms, the physical wood is the sensuous part. The thousands of dollars of perceived brand value, social status, and market demand is the supersensible part. It is the ghost that possesses the wood. Exchange value is not a physical property. It is a complex social relationship between human beings that takes on the phantom form of a relationship between inanimate things.
The extra $4,000 is a ghost we all collectively agree to hallucinate. So Marx's most rigorous, scientific, foundational critique of capitalism, the commodity form, is actually an exercise in hauntology.
Derrida refers to this as Marx's double barricade. Marx desperately tries to build a barricade to keep Stirner's idealist ghosts out of his pure materialism. But the barricade is constantly breached from the inside because Marx's own theoretical house is built on spectrality. You cannot separate the material economy from the spectral forces of belief, value, and social relations. They infect each other completely.
If we accept that ghosts, these invisible forces of value, history, and social relation, are baked into the very DNA of capitalism, we have to look at how they are manifesting right now. Derrida doesn't just leave this as a critique of the 19th century text. He brings the ghost directly into the post-Cold War reality of the 1990s. And honestly, reading his diagnosis of the world, it feels like it was written this morning.
It really does. This is where Derrida directly challenges Fukuyama's end of history. Against the sunny claim that liberal democracy has solved the riddle of human governance, Derrida paints a black picture. He offers a devastating tableau of a world that is severely out of joint, listing 10 specific plagues or deep systemic wounds that prove the triumph of the free market is largely an illusion.
Now, as we look at some of these plagues, I just want to remind you, the listener, of our impartiality agreement. We are analyzing Derrida's philosophical diagnosis, not endorsing a political platform. But to understand his philosophy, we have to see how he applies it to reality. He lists 10, but let's focus on the mechanisms of 3 or 4 of the most striking ones to see how they prove the world is haunted.
Let's start with what he calls the rise of phantom states. Derrida points to the massive infiltration of legitimate global economies and state apparatuses by organized crime mafias, drug cartels, and illicit syndicates.
How does a cartel act as a phantom state?
Because they exercise the power of state without the legal visibility. A massive international cartel generates GDP-level revenue, controls territory, commands armed forces, and dictates the lives of millions. They launder billions through legitimate banks, effectively propping up the visible economy with invisible illicit money.
Wow, okay.
The official democratic state claims sovereignty, but the phantom state actually dictates the reality on the ground. The clean, visible ontology of international law is entirely subverted by these spectral entities.
That perfectly illustrates hauntology. The thing that technically doesn't exist on the official map is the thing pulling the strings. Another plague he focuses on is the crushing burden of foreign debt on poorer nations. This feels like the most literal translation of inheriting a massive, toxic estate.
Foreign debt is the literal financialization of ghosts. When a developing nation is saddled with billions in debt, often accrued by past dictators or corrupt regimes who are long gone, the current living citizens are entirely trapped by the past.
Paying for crimes they didn't commit.
Exactly. The economic future of millions of people is sacrificed to pay interest on a ghost's ledger. They are starved of resources in the present to service an unpayable debt from history. It completely paralyzes their ability to participate in the supposedly equal democratic global market. History is literally taxing their daily bread.
It's the visor effect, but instead of demanding vengeance, the ghost is demanding interest payments. But the plague that I found most prophetic, the one that makes Derrida seem like a time traveler, is his focus on what he calls teletechnomedia. He argues that the very nature of political space is being destroyed by technology.
This is a crucial mechanism of modern spectrality. Derrida points out that the speed of information, the 24-hour news cycle, satellite broadcasts, and what would soon become the internet creates a literal technological hauntology.
Let's expand on that. How does a screen make a ghost real?
Think about the traditional concept of parliamentary democracy. It relies on physical presence. Representatives gather in a room, debate an issue in real time, and vote. But teletechnology moves faster than human deliberation. The news cycle demands instant reactions. Political figures are transformed from deliberating humans into synthetic media characters, sound bites, curated images, and PR narratives projected onto screens globally.
The politician on the screen is a specter. They are neither fully present in your living room nor fully absent.
And because the virtual image travels faster than actual policy can be written, politics becomes entirely performative. The real decisions are bypassed by the speed of the media machine. Traditional democratic institutions become structurally incompetent because they cannot keep up with the virtual reality that now dictates public opinion. The ghosts, the synthetic images, the viral panics, the algorithmic outrage are quite literally running the machine. We are surrounded by simulacra.
So, we have a world suffering from phantom states, shackled by the ghosts of debt, and governed by synthetic specters on screens. Traditional political structures are completely failing to handle this reality. But begs the ultimate question, what is Derrida's solution? If the world is this out of joint, we obviously can't go back to the old dogmatic Soviet model of Marxism. What are we supposed to do?
To answer that, we have to understand Derrida's highly nuanced relationship with Marxism itself. He does not suggest a return to the past. Derrida rigorously and systematically critiques traditional Marxist doctrine. He rejects the concept of the totalitarian party. He rejects the massive, oppressive state apparatus. And he fundamentally rejects the rigid, deterministic philosophy of history that claims a proletarian utopia is scientifically guaranteed to arrive.
He strips away all the institutional and dogmatic baggage of Marxism. He throws out the rule book.
But he keeps the spirit. He argues that his own philosophy, deconstruction, the practice of relentlessly questioning assumptions, taking apart structures of power to see how they work, and refusing to accept the status quo as natural or inevitable, is the true heir to the radical critical spirit of Marx. He wants to save the spirit of critique from the dogma of the party.
And to embody this spirit, he proposes something he calls the New International. Now, historically, the International refers to massive, organized socialist political bodies with central committees and strict agendas. When he says New International, is he proposing we start a new political party? Do we need to draft a charter and issue membership cards?
No, it is the exact opposite of an institution. The New International, as Derrida conceives it, is an alliance without status, without title, and without name. It has no headquarters, no central committee, and no membership list.
If it doesn't have any of those things, how does it exist?
It exists as a loose, borderless, non-institutional affinity of people across the globe. It is composed of anyone, anywhere, who shares the spirit of critique against the current state of global capital and international law. It is the coalition of people who look at the 10 plagues, the inequality, the debt, the technological alienation, and are moved to oppose them.
It's the practical, real-world application of keeping the guest room open. It's messianicity without messianism.
Precisely. It is acting in the here and now against injustice, without waiting for a utopian program, a specific leader, or a grand revolution to save us. It is an alliance of those who feel the heavy gaze of the ghosts of the oppressed, who accept the burden of their inheritance, and who work quietly and persistently to bend the arc of history toward a more hospitable future.
What an unbelievable mind-expanding journey this text takes us on. We started with the realization that the fall of the Berlin Wall didn't end history. It just populated it with ghosts. We explored the concept of hauntology, realizing that our present reality is never pure, but always deeply infected by the echoes of the past and the pull of the future.
Truly profound.
We looked through the visor of the ghost in Hamlet to understand that we are born into a massive, complicated debt of inheritance that we must actively filter and transform.
And we examine how true justice cannot be reduced to legal calculations, but is an infinite responsibility owed to the non-living, the dead, and the unborn, requiring us to maintain an absolute, hospitable openness to the unknown future.
We watched the ultimate materialist Karl Marx try to bust ghosts, only to realize that his own theories of capitalism were fundamentally haunted by the spectral, supersensible nature of value. We faced Derrida's plagues of the modern world, seeing how virtual technology has made ghosts literal in our daily lives.
It's everywhere.
And finally, we uncovered the idea of a nameless, borderless, new international center, an affinity of people pushing for a better world through endless radical critique.
It is a philosophy that offers no easy comfort, no X-ray clarity, but demands our absolute ethical engagement with the specters that surround us.
Which brings me to a final thought I want to leave you with. Building on Derrida's concept of teletechnology and spectrality, I want you to think about your own life right now. Think about your digital footprint. In an age of artificial intelligence, deepfakes, massive cloud storage, and predictive algorithms, your data, your voice, your text messages, and your images will outlive your physical body by centuries.
A literal technological survival beyond the grave.
We are actively, relentlessly mass-producing our own specters right now, every single time we post, record, or interact online. Someday, you will be the ghost haunting the server. So the question is, when the time comes and your digital specter is summoned by the algorithms of the future, who will be looking through the visor of your ghost, and what kind of justice will they demand of the world to come?
A profound and necessary question for a deeply haunted age.
Think about that the next time you look at a photograph or an X-ray and wonder what's really hiding in the murky waters just out of frame. Thank you for joining us on this deep dive into the architecture of these ideas. We wish you well, and we'll see you on the next exploration.